I didn't realize fear could live this quietly inside a person, but here it is, sitting in the spaces between your messages, hiding in the pauses that didn't used to feel this heavy, growing louder every time I convince myself not to say what I'm really feeling, because I'm afraid that admitting how much you matter might be the very thing that pushes you away. I'm afraid of losing you, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, not with tears or goodbyes, but in the slow, almost invisible way where someone fades while still standing right in front of you, where conversations shorten, where effort softens, where silence starts doing more talking than words ever did. I keep telling myself that nothing has actually happened yet, that you haven't said you're leaving, that I'm overthinking, but fear doesn't need proof. It only needs possibility, and the possibility of you not being here anymore has taken root in my chest and refuses to leave. I replay our memories like evidence in a trial against my own mind, searching for reassurance in moments that once felt ordinary. Your laugh, your attention, the way you used to stay a little longer than necessary. And I wonder when those moments stopped feeling guaranteed and started feeling fragile. I wonder if you noticed the shift before I did, or if you're standing on the same edge, pretending everything is fine because saying otherwise feels like admitting defeat. I hate that part of me that wants to protect my pride instead of my heart, that part that says, don't ask them to stay, don't make it heavy, don't be the one who cares more, because what kind of world did we build where caring deeply feels like a liability instead of a strength? I want to tell you how much your presence steadies me, how your absence already feels louder than it should, but I swallow those words because I don't want to become a responsibility. I don't want love to feel like pressure. I don't want you to stay out of guilt instead of choice. And yet, staying silent feels worse because silence creates its own story, and it's never a kind one. It fills the gaps with doubt, with imagined endings, with questions that don't have answers. I find myself studying the smallest details now, the timing of your replies, the tone of your words, the energy behind your silence, and I hate that I'm doing this, hate that fear has turned me into someone who analyzes affection like data, but when something matters this much, your mind will do anything to prepare for the impact of losing it. I remember when silence between us felt comfortable, when it meant rest instead of distance, when I didn't feel the need to fill every quiet moment with reassurance, and I grieve that version of us even though I don't know if it's gone or just hiding behind exhaustion and unspoken feelings. I wonder if you know how close I am to asking you to stay, not because I want to trap you, but because I want clarity, because uncertainty is heavier than rejection, because not knowing hurts more than hearing the truth ever could. There's a particular kind of pain in loving someone while pretending you're not afraid to lose them, in that forces you to perform strength while your insides are quietly unraveling. And I'm tired of performing. I'm tired of acting like distance doesn't hurt, like your silence doesn't echo, like the thought of you leaving doesn't wake me up at night with a tight chest and unanswered questions. I don't want to beg. I don't want to dramatize. I just want to be honest. But honesty feels risky when the ground beneath you doesn't feel stable, because once you say, please don't leave, you can't take it back. And if the answer isn't what you hoped for, that vulnerability stays exposed. Still, there's a deeper fear underneath all of this. The fear that if I don't speak now, silence will make the decision for us. That one day I'll look back and realize this was the moment I should have chosen core. Age over comfort, truth over protection, love over ego. I don't know if you're drifting or just distracted, if you're struggling or simply changing, but I know this. Losing you without ever telling you how much you mattered would hurt more than losing you after telling the truth. So here I am, standing in this quiet fear, trying to decide whether love means letting go without a word or risking Eve. Writhing by asking you to stay, knowing that either way, something inside me is already changing. Because once you're afraid of losing someone, you never love them the same way again. You love them more carefully, more honestly, and sometimes more painfully. The strange thing about being afraid of losing you is how it quietly rewrites my behavior before I even notice it happening, how it teaches me to shrink my needs into something more acceptable, more convenient, something that won't rock the emotional balance I'm desperately trying to preserve, because when you care this much, you start believing that asking for reassurance is the same as asking for too much. I tell myself to be patient, to give you space, to trust that silence doesn't automatically mean distance, but patience becomes pie. When it's one-sided, when waiting feels less like respect and more like erasing myself to keep the peace. I've caught myself rewriting messages before sending them, deleting honest sentences and replacing them with lighter ones, convincing myself that sounding easygoing will make me easier to keep, as if love were a fragile object that shatters under the weight of truth. There's a quiet humiliation in that realization, that fear can make you negotiate with your own heart, can make you believe that being low maintenance is safer than being real, that asking for clarity is more dangerous than living in confusion. I notice how I hesitate before reaching out, wondering if I'm interrupting your life, wondering if my presence still feels welcome, or if it's starting to feel like an obligation. And those questions hurt because they didn't used to exist. They were born from the gap that's grown between us, the one neither of us has named, but both of us can feel. I keep wondering if you sense my restraint, if you notice how carefully I step around your moods now, how I avoid certain topics, how I pretend I'm unaffected by the distance because I don't want to add weight to whatever you're already carrying. And yet, the more I hide, the heavier it gets, because suppressing love doesn't make it disappear. It just turns it inward, where it becomes anxiety, self-doubt, and a constant low-level ache that follows me through my days. I've started asking myself uncomfortable questions, whether I'm loving you or protecting myself, whether my silence is patience or fear, whether staying quiet is an act of maturity or an act of self-betrayal. And I don't like how often the answers blur together. There's a part of me that wants to confront this directly, to say, I feel you pulling away and I'm scared, but another part of me is terrified that naming it will make it irreversible, that once spoken, the possibility of losing you will harden into reality. It's exhausting, living in that scion, because every interaction feels loaded, every word feels like it might be misinterpreted, every pause feels like it might mean something final. I find myself remembering small moments, how easily you used to lean into conversations, how present you felt, how natural it was to share things without overthinking. And I compare them to now, to this careful dance where I'm constantly gauging your emotional temperature, trying to match it so I don't stand out as the one who cares more. That comparison is painful because it forces me to acknowledge that something has shifted, even if I don't know why, even if I don't know whether it's temporary or permanent. I hate that fear has made me strategic with my affection, that it's taught me to ration vulnerability like it's a limited resource. Beck. Oz love shouldn't feel like a game of restraint. It should feel like expansion. But fear doesn't want expansion. Fear wants control. And when you're afraid of losing someone, control starts to look like safety, even though it's the opposite. I wonder if you know how often I almost ask you what's changed, how close I come to saying, please tell me where I stand, and how often I stop myself, Becca. I don't want to hear an answer I'm not ready for. There's a deep loneliness in that hesitation, in wanting reassurance from the one person you're afraid to ask because you don't want to be the reason they pull away. I try to remind myself that real connection can survive honesty, that love isn't as fragile as my fear makes it seem. But when you care this much, logic loses its grip and emotio, and start writing their own rules. I don't want to become someone who disappears inside a relationship, someone who mistakes endurance for love, someone who sacrifices their voice to keep someone else comfortable. At the same time, I don't want to lose you by pushing too hard, by demanding certainty in a moment that might simply require patience. That's the cruel paradox of this fear. It convinces we that both speaking and staying silent could lead to the same loss, and it leaves you frozen between the two, carrying the weight of an unasked question. I'm learning that the real damage isn't just the possibility of you leaving, it's how this uncertainty is teaching me to doubt my worth, to wonder if being fully seen is too much, if asking someone to stay is a weakness instead of an act of rage. And deep down, beneath all the fear and hesitation, there's a quiet truth I can't ignore anymore. If I have to constantly minimize myself to keep you, then I'm already losing something important, even if you haven't walked away yet. And that realization hurts almost as much as the thought of you leaving, because it forces me to confront not just my fear of losing you, but my fear of standing for what I need before silence decides for us both. At some point, fear stops being just an emotion and starts becoming a mirror. And when I finally looked into it honestly, I realized that being afraid of losing you wasn't only about you leaving, it was about what I was willing to lose in myself just to keep you here. That realization didn't arrive gently, it arrived slowly, through exhaustion, through the quiet resentment of swallowing my needs, through the ache of pretending that uncertainty didn't hurt as much as it did, and it forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. Love that requires you to disappear is already teaching you how to live without yourself. I began to understand that silence isn't new. It shapes outcomes, it makes decisions without asking permission, and every moment I stayed quiet out of fear was a moment I taught myself that my feelings were less important than preserving your comfort. I don't want love that survives only because I make myself smaller. I don't want connection that depends on me constantly, adjusting while hoping you'll notice and choose me anyway. There's a quiet dignity in asking someone to stay, not as a demand, not as a plea, but as an honest offering of truth. And I finally saw that withholding that truth wasn't protecting the relationship, it was postponing clarity. I had been so focused on not scaring you away that I never asked whether staying scared me too, whether living in constant uncertainty was slowly hollowing out the joy I once felt so naturally with you. When I imagine a future where I never speak up, I see a version of myself who becomes cautious, guarded, and distant. Not because I don't care, but because caring without safety eventually turns into self-defense. And that's not the person I want to be, not with you or anyone else. I want love that can hold honesty without collapsing, love that doesn't punish vulnerability, love that understands that asking for reassurance isn't weakness, it's communication. If you leave after hearing my truth, then at least I won't be haunted by the question of whether staying silent would have changed anything. I won't have to wonder if courage could have rewritten the ending. I'm learning that fear of loss can either teach you how to cling or how to choose yourself, and choosing yours. LF doesn't mean you care less, it means you care enough to demand something real. So if I ask you to stay now, it's not because I'm afraid of being alone, it's because I believe what we have is worth protecting with honesty rather than fear. And if you choose to leave, then I'll grieve deeply and painfully, but I'll grieve knowing that I didn't abandon myself in the process. I won't carry the additional weight of regret, of unsaid truths, of wondering whether love failed or whether silence did. I've realized that love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure quietly. It's proven by how willing you are to be seen, even when being seen risks everything. So this is me stepping out of fear, not because it disappeared, but because I refuse to let it decide for me anymore. Whether you stay or go, I want to walk away from this moment knowing I chose honesty over hiding, courage over comfort, and self-respect over survival. Because losing you would hurt, but losing myself while trying to keep you would hurt far more. And I am finally brave enough to admit that love should never require you to vanish to be worthy of staying.